Kia ora koutou, no mai haramai. I think we've probably got most people with us now. The numbers are settling, so I'm going to make a start. I'll open with our Karakia and then I'll talk you through what you can expect from the session. Kia ora. Tikina atura te pūtaki o ngā korero. I runga I te ranga Māori e, ki nākau te kaha. Kia mau ki te honanga tangata. Ka whakamaua kia tīna. Hui e tāki e. So kia ora koutou. Tipu Akioki, Ingarangi, Manchester, Sheffield. No whanganui atara e noho ana, ko Joe Fowler tōku ingoa. I'm the Deputy Chief Executive Te Aka Tūhono, Manatū Tonga, and no mai haramai. Welcome to our information session. I'm going to spend the next, and I'm afraid it does take about 20-25 minutes to come through and talk to you about the Cultural Sector Regeneration Fund, Te Tahua Whakamarohi, I te Rāngai Ahurea. And I'm going to be helping you understand what the fund is for, helping you hopefully determine whether it's something that works for you and might be a fund that you want to come to and talk to us about your initiative within. And then we'll get on to some questions. And thank you to those that have submitted questions in advance. But please do add questions to the chat during the session. I see a few familiar names on the participant lists, and that's always reassuring as I talk into the void of a Zoom call. So, kia ora. Okay, let's get started. So, the Cultural Sector Regeneration Fund has a key whakatauki and an overall purpose around toi tipu, toi awe, grow the world of arts, so we may be inspired by the world of arts. And those words were chosen by our fabulous team in Manatū Tonga to signify that we're looking to encourage those within the arts, culture and heritage community to continue to plant the seeds of creativity in their chosen fields so that we can help communities share and benefit from creativity in Aotearoa, and also focusing on understanding and acknowledging the gifts passed down to us by those that have gone before. So that's a little bit on the whakatauki there before I get into the more bureaucratic and square world parts of the fund. Thank you, John. So a bit of background first, if I may. Back in March 2020, a date that not many people look back fondly on, was the start of the COVID pandemic and the public health measures in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Within a month or so of the start of those public health measures, government had agreed about $374 billion million dollars of funding for the arts sector. That would have been a slightly different picture. That funding flowed into the arts, culture and heritage sectors through multiple agencies. Manatū Tonga had a little under half of that funding to allocate directly, and our partners in Creative New Zealand, Music Commission, Te Papo and so on held funding outside of that. That funding was inevitably and correctly invested in the survival of the sector during that period, and funding flowed into keeping the lights on across many initiatives, many organisations, venues and individuals too. At the end of 2021 and at the beginning of 2022, we had the Delta and then the Omicron outbreaks. And it quickly became apparent that we were going to exhaust that funding, keeping the lights on, particularly around the event sector, which was particularly badly hit by the restrictions put in place to slow the pandemic. So in January, February, we secured another $121 million of funding to support the sector, bringing the total up to nearly $500 million. As we stand now, and these slides are a few days old, we have about 355 days left to allocate our remaining recovery funding. And we are really clear that we now need to focus on investing in things over the next 9 or 10 months that will make a difference into the medium term. There's still a range of funding available to support that immediate kind of survival space. Although I'm not going to stand in front of you and say that that's sufficient or adequate at this time. but our focus now is going to be on finding and funding initiatives that have a lasting impact, that enable the sector to be more sustainable and resilient going forward. And we know we're not searching for unicorns here, because we hear fantastic ideas every day through our other grant and funding schemes from people in the sector that have got plans for doing things that are going to improve things in the future. Thank you, John. So just a little bit of reflection first, and how we've, just to give you some insights into what we've heard from people and organisations in the arts, culture and heritage sectors about how we need to work and work with them around our funding. So the first message we've heard loud and clear is, can you just keep it simple? We don't want you to dream up 73 different funds in the top floor of an office in Wellington and attach your specific conditions to them and then say, hey, which one of these 73 funds do you want to apply for? It's complicated enough already. So what we've heard is keep it simple and keep it focused on the outcomes. So if you've got outcomes that the government wants to achieve, the reasons that Cabinet allocated the money, be open about them, and let's have some conversations about things we might be able to do together that achieve those outcomes. We've also heard, and I hope you'd appreciate, we've been trying our best, despite coming from a fairly square world bureaucratic government agency, we've heard about the need to keep it human. Can we speak to people? Can we have some conversations about things? We don't want to fill in a form and get an automatic response 2 weeks later that says, no, sorry, nice to hear from you, but no. We don't want a computer says no response. So we've really taken that on board and tried to think about what it means for how we work with people and organisations in the sector, particularly given the challenges of the last couple of years. We've also heard an ask for involvement. So don't where you can, and I appreciate this is challenging, make decisions about us without us is not where we want to be. And so if there are things that you think are going to benefit a part of the sector or requests for funding that you've had, think about what that means for the sector more widely. And where you can, talk to us about that so we can test your thinking and help you make sound decisions as a government agency. Last but not least, we've heard a request to support our collaboration. So if people have got together in a place or within a genre or an art form or a discipline and have identified some things that they want to do, and there's been kind of collaboration around that, don't come in randomly to the side and fund something different. Yeah. So how do we have conversations together about the priorities that exist already, and try and, as far as we can, put funding into supporting other people's priorities. So I've said support our collaboration here, but I guess our remit really is not undermining it where it's already taken place. Thanks, John. So in terms of how we've designed the fund with those steers from the sector in mind and the outcomes that government have given us to achieve, we've consolidated several different funds into one pot. So rather than running 3 or 4 different funds, a capability fund, an innovation fund, and we've said, let's take the $28 million that we've got left to allocate in the next 355 days and put it on the table. And let's be really transparent with people who might be considering utilising that funding, what the outcomes that we've been charged with achieving are in relation to that funding. And I'll cover that in a bit more detail shortly. Let's provide really clear information for applicants so that they don't waste their time chasing a fund that is not a good match with their initiative. And also, more importantly, let's make sure that if people are out there with things that are going to make a real difference for the sector, that we encourage them to come through the front door and have a conversation with us about what we might achieve together. Let's keep it human. So let's put some relationship managers in place that mean that that as we progress through a process and we're considering a funding initiative, let's have some real people alongside that. And as far as we can, let's keep them consistent. So you're not having to explain the same thing to lots of different people in lots of different stages. Critically, and I'll cover this in more detail, no doubt, in the questions, we want to provide some opportunities for sector involvement and feedback. And what that means in practice is if an initiative is put forward that, for example, is intended to benefit all the museums in Aotearoa, then let's give and provide an opportunity for people involved in the museum sector to comment on that initiative, to offer their support, or to raise questions about their involvement or prioritisation of that initiative. That's quite a departure from traditional practice, and a reason I'll return to that later, no doubt. Finally, let's make sure we stagger funding decisions, and that's about not undermining collaboration. So if things have been put together, but they're not quite fully formed yet and aren't ready, we don't want to rush that. We don't want to force a marriage of convenience within sector. We want to allow some time for conversations to take place. I'd love that to be a longer time frame, but in government agencies, when you get given money for 3 or 4 years, you spend it in 3 or 4 years or you risk losing it. So we want to be absolutely clear and get the funding out in the timescale that we've got. And that does mean that we are compressed a little with timescales. Thank you, John. So just in terms of the fund purpose, I've gone through this a couple of times, but I will reiterate. The fund is designed to support the arts, culture and heritage sectors to recover from the impacts of COVID-19 and help the sector thrive. We want to find and fund initiatives that enable the arts, culture and heritage sectors to be more successful in the future. And to be really clear, that means that this fund is not designed to support me to build a recording studio in my house and further my amateur and fairly terrible songwriting skills. It's not about a creative project for Joe. If I was building or expanding a studio that was supporting dozens of rangatahi to develop their musicianship and skills, and that was going to have benefits that cascade into the next year or two, that's the kind of initiative that will do well in this fund, because it has those consequential impacts. It has an impact beyond the life of the initiative and will support the sector going forward. So the key outcome for the fund at the top of that list is sustainability and resilience of the arts, culture and heritage sector. And the 4 outcomes beneath that are improved safeguarding of Mātauranga Māori and support of Toi Māori, which has been a key feature through our funds and is the reason why such a high proportion of our funding has gone to Māori-led initiatives. Improving access and participation in arts, culture and heritage. And by access, we mean audience enjoyment, etc. People overcoming barriers to be able to enjoy the benefits of arts, culture and heritage. And in participation, people being able to actively engage in artistic endeavours despite the barriers they may face to doing so. Increased use of arts, culture and heritage as a tool to improve well-being. Obviously, that's a key feature of the current government and a key feature of the fund. And last but not least, increased employment and skill development opportunities. So how many people are going to benefit materially from an initiative, both in the term of the initiative, but also on an ongoing basis. So the fund purpose and the outcomes are really important here because we've placed so much trust in them. We haven't split this into an employment and skills fund or a capability fund or an access fund. Let's roll it together and let's see what initiatives can play against all of those outcomes. Thank you, John. I should say on the outcomes, we're not looking for initiatives to be hitting all of those outcomes in a big way. However, for an initiative to be successful, you're going to have to be contributing pretty strongly against a couple of those outcomes or more. Until we get a full table full of applications, obviously we don't know how things will and spread across those outcomes, but we'll obviously learn that soon enough. So in terms of the process for the fund, so getting into the mechanics of this now, the first stage in the process is checking whether you're eligible for the fund. So for example, Crown entities at the moment can't apply for the fund. So Creative New Zealand couldn't come to us and apply to be a recipient of this funding, nor could another Crown entity, say like Te Papa. However, an organisation like Music Commission, as not a Crown entity, could potentially be an applicant for the fund. Not sure they will be, to be honest, but just as an example. What that stage also enables you to do is to download a simple questionnaire from the site that will be available in a couple of weeks' time, and fill in that questionnaire at home. That is not an essay writing piece of work. It's 16, 17 questions with answers that range from A to E, a bit of a multiple choice test, and that will just give you an indication of whether the initiative that you're looking at pursuing is a good match with the outcomes that we've been charged with achieving as Manatū Tonga. So that process is designed to help people understand whether something they've got is going to be exciting and a good match with the fund or not. The second stage of the process, if you're feeling pretty confident that the initiative is a good line, a good match, is to submit an expression of interest. All of that expression of interest is an online version of the questionnaire that you've just filled in at home, with some other material around budget amounts and so on and so forth. So we're trying to keep that as a light touch as possible, because our next stage is where we start getting human, and we'll reach out to you once we have an expression of interest and trigger a discussion, schedule a discussion with Manatū Tonga. And during that discussion, we'll basically test whether the responses to the outcome questionnaire and the initiative overall are consistent with how other people have answered the questions. And we'll also give an indication of what else is on the table, and how competitive the process is looking given where your outcome questionnaire is. So again, we're just trying to manage expectations here. So if I've put my recording studio through, despite the outcomes questionnaire telling me that it wasn't the best idea in the world in relation to this fund, then I would expect the relationship manager at this stage saying, look, Joe, you've asked for $1 million for your own recording studio. It's pretty unrealistic given what else is on the table. If I still chose to pursue a full proposal, we're not going to say no at this point. We're not going to say don't put anything through, but we will actively encourage proposals that look the strongest fit with the outcomes, and we will be honest in our terms of our feedback with proposals that don't look strong against those outcomes. So in terms of the full proposal, that looks a bit more like an application. Your relationship manager will guide you through that stage and make sure you've got the information right, and the information that you need. We've got some templates that people could use, but if people have already got business plans, already got budgets allocated in or written up in different ways, we'll take anything that people have got. We don't want to create an administrative burden, and we recognise that whilst we might have consolidated our fund into one, we are still one of many funders, and people are still going around many funding agencies trying to secure funding. So we don't want to complicate things more than we need to. Stage 5 is the feedback opportunity stage, and it's what I referred to earlier. So once we've got a full proposal submitted, we will publish a summary of that proposal and a bit of other supporting information, and that will go up on a website. And if people want to comment on that proposal, they will be able to do so, and that feedback will be collated by Manatū Tonga and summarised. A summary of that feedback will be provided back to the applicant. Now, I want to be really clear on this. We're most interested in feedback from people or organisations that are intended beneficiaries of the initiative. So we want letters of support, kind of positive comments, etc., all welcome during that phase. But we're also trying to get to a no surprises piece. So we don't fund something that everybody who is an intended beneficiary then says, what have you funded that for? We don't see how that would work for us. Yeah. So I just want to be clear that that's what that stage is for. It's about transparency and helping us make safe, sound decisions that benefit the sector in the medium term. We then get through to the evaluation and decision making. And again, I'll spend a minute or two on this. So the plan here is that that stage, we've got an outcomes questionnaire that everybody's comfortable with, is accurate. We've got budget information, which obviously plays a part. We've got some feedback from the sector, and we'll have done a bit of testing around if we need to. And what I mean by that is if we've got a proposal on the table that we don't have expertise in, and there will be several, and we will reach out for external expertise. So if we've got something that's heavy in the digital or e-commerce space, we'll be reaching out for expertise in that space to help advise us and make sure that plans put forward are realistic. So we are effectively bringing in experts as appropriate to help us assess different proposals and initiatives, rather than having 2 or 3 people on a panel that are expected to have a broad level of expertise across such a broad fund. We then get through to the usual funding agreements and let's sign a deal and so on and so forth. So I'll not cover that in detail, but I'll just tell you a little bit more about what we will factor in when we make those decisions. Thanks, John. So, as hopefully I've got across in the last 15 minutes, we'll make decisions based on how strongly the proposed initiative contributes to the outcomes. And our ideal situation is that that's completely transparent, that we've got an agreed position against each of the outcomes that we all understand and are consistent with. Obviously, the level of funding requested and the level of funding sought needs to be proportionate to the contribution to the outcomes. So my music studio that does a wonderful thing for me that costs $1 million obviously isn't going to score that well. Whereas if an initiative has already got some funding from 2 or 3 other sources and just needs a bit of unlocking extra funding to make something wonderful happen, then obviously that kind of initiative is going to do well, because it's seeking a relatively low amount of funding to achieve to unlock something that will achieve a lot. Obviously, the strength of the plan for delivery and the lead organisation's history of delivering similar initiatives are relevant pieces here, as they are for all our funds. And finally, that level of support from the sector, particularly those that are intended to benefit, is a key part here too. Thanks, John. I just want to spend a few minutes giving an example of one of the outcomes and just talking you through how that works. So one of the outcomes here is sustainability and resilience of the arts, culture and heritage sectors. So that's one of those 5 outcomes that I covered earlier. And on the questionnaire, there's 3 questions in relation to that outcome. The first explores the reach of the initiative, how widely felt it will be. So will that initiative benefit a specific sector, like dance, genre, rock music, place, Kirikiridoa arts community, or an organisation like a single museum or gallery or so on. So this question explores the reach, how widely felt the benefits of the initiative will be and who will be benefiting from it. The second question explores the depth of the change, if you like, how much the initiative increases sustainability and capability. So is this a kind of minor patch that helps that group of people get through the next few months, or does it give new tools that enable sustainability into the medium term for a small collection of organizations, for example? Does it really or does it really change the game for a sector or place and set up a bright future for the next few years? I'm not pitching here, but you get the sense. So those 2 questions at the start are about the breadth of the change in terms of who benefits, and the depth, the significance of that change. And the third question there is, what level of support does your initiative have? So would the people who you think will benefit from the initiative recognise it as a priority for them? So those 3 questions come with answers from A to E, which are effectively scaled. And then there's an outcome assessment at the end of that. So pretty simple, straightforward stuff. And hopefully allows people to have a quick test of whether the initiative they're looking forward is a good match. Thanks, John. I'm not going to cover this one in the same detail, but it just illustrates the same format. This is in terms of our team here have done some great work on the Mataranga Māori in support of Toi Māori outcome, building on work from multiple agencies over the last couple of years in this space. And I'll just touch on the first question in that outcome assessment. Kowai, who is leading the initiative. Obviously, if there's an initiative that's really pushing impact on Mataranga Māori and support of Toi Māori, one of the first questions that will be asked is, who's leading that initiative? What's the governance arrangements? Is this by, with, for Māori? Is it Māori advised, but a Taui reorganisation, or a Māori not involved at all in the initiative, which would be obviously extremely surprising given the outcome area. And the other 2 questions expand on that. I'll not go into more detail there. So some key dates. We open for expressions of interest on the 27th of July and close on the 7th of September. So that's a 6-week window where people can submit an expression of interest. There's then 2 windows to submit a full proposal. The first window, which is really best suited to initiatives that are pretty well formed already, is the 8th of August to the 18th of October. So that enables us to get up and running and get some funding to initiatives that are going to make a difference. So that's the kind of, if you've got something that's ready, come in there. The second window is basically the most of February, 1st to the 24th of February. And that allows some time for people to develop a proposal or initiative out and spend a bit more time on that. There'll be 4 decision points spread between October 22 and April 23. And basically at each of those decision points, any full proposal that is on the table and has been through that feedback stage will be considered for funding. And we will take the top X number of those proposals up and put some funding into them and enter the agreement and negotiation stage. Anything that's left on the table just carries through to the next one. Yep. So there's no no's at that point. There is only kind of yeses, i.e. these 6 or 7 initiatives will get funding, the rest will carry through. But obviously we will continue through the relationship manager to provide feedback to the initiative proposer to make sure they understand where they sit. And if somebody chose to withdraw a proposal, they'd be obviously well within their right to do that. Or if they've secured some funding from another source and need to change some of the information in the proposal, which may make it more likely to secure funding, then again, we can make that adjustment in between those rounds. We often get the question here as to whether, therefore, you should get your full proposal in early. We can't provide direct guidance to you on that. What we can say is the full proposal is, particularly if it's looking for 6-figure, $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 of money, needs to be pretty well put together. And we wouldn't want you rushing something that would be compromised into the early stages. And that doesn't make a lot of sense. Okay, thanks, John. Great. So we're going to get onto the questions section in a minute, but just to put a flag out here for the website, and we've got more information on the fund there. And we've got a brilliant team. I say team, often 1 or 2 people. Our support.culture email address, and we love hearing from you. We love feedback, and we love learning from people in the sector about how we can support you better. So do provide comments, any technical questions, anything at all that you want to poke at us. Do drop us an email at that email address, and we'll do our best to come back to you. Okay, what have I missed? A couple of things. We've funded dozens and dozens and dozens of seed projects from both our Capability Fund and our Innovation Fund over the last 18 months. And this fund provides a runway for full proposals that have arisen from those seed funding projects. There's no guarantee of funding, obviously, but the outcomes here for this fund are basically the same as the outcomes that sat above both the Innovation and Capability Fund. So if you've got an initiative that you've developed through seed funding that is about leaving a lasting impact in the sector and making a real difference, then this should provide a good runway for proposals should you be ready to submit them. Okay. I'm going to move on to some questions now, and I've got the team busy consolidating things that have come through the chat into a document to the side here for me. So I'll get onto those. So I think I've covered how the Regen Fund relates to Te Urungi and cultural capability programs. This is effectively the parent of those and provides a runway for people that have received seed funding through those projects. In terms of Te Urungi funding decisions, we're in a slightly compromised position, I'll be honest, in that there will be several people, couple of dozen, in fact, of people that won't hear whether they've been successful in the Te Urungi funding round for the innovation until mid-August. which means that they're only then going to have 2 or 3 weeks if they want to put an expression of interest in after that funding point. Sadly, that does mean that people waiting for a decision might choose to put an expression of interest in for this fund, despite having put a proposal in already for innovation. And I'm just sorry about that. That's just how the timelines have worked. So yes, you people can apply for this fund whilst they're waiting for Te Rongi, but you should have 2 or 3 weeks after your decision and before the expression of interest period closes. And obviously, if you've done the work on your plan on a page for innovation, which most people would have used, then you'll be well placed to make a quick submission into this fund. I've got a question on whether startups can apply. As I mentioned on the funding decision round, if people, if a startup organization, or more likely the people leading that startup organization, have a track record of using funding, making changes, delivering projects of a similar scale, no problem at all. But if obviously you've just had a bright idea and haven't got a track record of delivery in that space of anything like that scale, then that's bound to make us concerned, because at the end of the day, we want to squeeze every bit of value out of this money, and we can't afford to fund things that don't have a really strong chance of success. Multi-year proposals is the next question. So as I've been saying several times, and those who've worked in government or with government will know why I'm stressing this so much, we need to allocate the funding this year, this financial year for government, which means well before June 23. However, a programme or initiative that we fund may go on for a year or two beyond that date, and how you arrange your funding over that time period is your concern and will reflect your business plan. And so that's the position that we're in here. We're not looking at funding initiatives that are effectively business as usual rolling onwards. So if you've got a thing that's run out of money this year and you just need some money to keep it going next year, and then you'll be looking for money to keep it going the year after, this probably isn't the best fund for you. We're looking for things that deliver something, make a change that enables better things to happen in the future. The funding, they've got a question here on whether funding can be spent on contractor or project coordinator costs that are associated with the programme. Yes. What we're looking at here is a budget to deliver an initiative with all the associated costs that are with that. And if that's in the business plan, it's in the budget, okay to buy. Funding for capital. So the agreement that we have for ministers is that we can fund anything up to 50% capital costs. That means that we're not looking to fund the building of a new building, but obviously if there are capital costs within the initiative up to 50%, that's fine. And let's be clear, the initiative budget will often be bigger than the funding that is sought from Manatū Tonga, because we find there's quite often other money flown around as part of the picture. Got a good question, thank you, on multiple projects and one proposal. If you have a set of interlinked initiatives that collectively achieve the benefits and the outcomes that we're looking for, then bundle them up and put them to us as a single initiative. If you've got two things that are very distinct, for example, they benefit quite different groups of people, then they may be better off as two proposals. Your relationship manager can provide further advice on that should you choose to come in. Just having a question here on Creative New Zealand and investment clients. So just to clarify my earlier point, Creative New Zealand wouldn't be able to apply for this fund because they're a Crown entity, and I know that's not the question, but organisations receiving funding from Creative New Zealand, Auckland Council, the man down the street, we don't care. We're interested in whether the initiative delivers against the outcomes, and if other people are putting funding in to help achieve that initiative, that makes it a better value proposition for us anyway. So yeah, no problem at all there. In terms of the expression of interest, I've got a question here on whether you need to get the expression of interest in earlier than the 7th of September deadline. The 7th of September is the deadline for expressions of interest. Obviously, if you wanted to put a full proposal in to that first window, it may make sense for you to put your expression of interest in very soon after the opening date of the 27th of July, because obviously we need to have some conversations with you, make an appointment, have some work some things through to allow you time to get to that first decision point table. So if you've got a fully formed initiative and you're chomping at the bit to get your full proposal together and get the EOI early, and we can have some conversations. And my team will be grateful if all of the expression of interest don't arrive on the same day. I've got a question around a whānau level initiative to care for and sustain our largest living tipuna, and whether that be eligible. If there is somebody that we can have a funding agreement with and an initiative that is looking like it's going to achieve against the outcomes, then we're good. We're not putting arbitrary exclusions in other than a couple around funding Crown entities and local government. We can be very flexible. What's important to us is that initiative delivers against the outcomes, and we can evidence that and make safe and sound decisions about initiatives. Got a question, and this comes up a lot because people don't necessarily want to share the details of their projects live here through the chat. If you have questions related to your specific circumstances, if you're at all unsure about eligibility or any part of the process, just hit us up at support.culture and we'll be able to provide you some bespoke advice. And the team there love hearing from you, so do reach out. Okay, now I've got to the back end of the chat here, but there's a few questions that came up in the previous sessions that you might find helpful. So if you're all right on time, I'll just spend a couple of minutes going through those. So one of the questions that's come up is, do I need to partner with iwi, council, arts organisations for my proposal to be successful? Would it be advantageous? What I'd say is, going back to that first outcome, we are interested in the level of support that your initiative has. And if you were looking at doing something, for example, in the Mātauranga Māori space, in a given rohi, then obviously having some of the right people around and supportive of that is going to be beneficial. Similarly, if you want to do something that's going to change the game for museums, but people in the museum sector and the directors of museums have never heard of you or the initiative, then that's not necessarily going to serve you that well. In terms of the feedback component, I think I've covered that already. I'll just reiterate a couple of points. We are not looking for we're not going to take 100 comments about an initiative being rubbish because I don't like Joe as being particularly relevant. We're interested in feedback from people that are affected and potential beneficiaries of an initiative primarily. And we will reach out for specialist expertise if we need to supplement that. We do reserve the right to pull the feedback mechanism down a notch, or maybe constrain the people that can feedback if we do start to get a lot of vexatious comments. But at the moment, we're going with a let's trust approach and bring the feedback through. Got another question on eligibility. So can some projects previously funded by Manatū Tonga apply for the Regeneration Fund? Let's be clear, if your initiative is hitting against those outcomes and provides exciting opportunities for the sector to be more successful in the future, come and speak to us, regardless of whether you've had funding from our funds or anyone else's in the past. And we're interested in making safe, sound decisions that make a difference. I think I've covered the question on who's making the funding decision, but I will just reiterate that again. For all of our funds, the decision on funding is made by the Chief Executive of Manatū Tonga or somebody within Manatū Tonga who they delegate that responsibility to. At the moment, and through our previous funds, it's been the Chief Executive of Manatū Tonga. They are advised by a range of people in making that decision, and recommendations are made to them. So in this case, So in this case, it will be the chief exec making the decisions, advised by myself and a panel of people internally, based on the evidence that we've received and the feedback that we've received and processed through the fund. Just projects need a firm completion date is probably the last question, but one maybe. We would expect a delivery plan for an initiative. That's a key part of our consideration. So if that delivery plan will be finished in 2030, then clearly that's pretty unrealistic for us to step into in this space. So we'd be looking at the phase that is in the next couple of years and what can be delivered within that phase. Got a request for someone to make an appointment. Drop us an email. As I mentioned, the team are waiting to hear from you, and we really benefit from feedback. So do provide that feedback. Do send further questions to support.culture. We're not fragile. So if some of the information we're providing to you or this session itself is not meeting your needs, do let us know, and then we can improve things for the next one. Final question. Will projects that have had seed funding have any kind of priority? Short answer, no. We're interested in projects that deliver against the outcomes, and I just can't reiterate that enough. This is a level playing field. We're interested in initiatives that are going to make a difference for the sector, and this is probably a nice place for me to conclude. Is that really what we're looking for here? Is in 2 or 3 years' time, we want people to look back at the things that we funded over the next 6 months and be able to point at things that have made a real difference for them in the sector. It's that lasting impact and things that have made things easier and helped more people be more successful and achieve their well-being goals is where we're at. Okay. Well, that's worn me out for Friday, so I'll return to the rainy Wellington streets. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your Friday to come and listen to me droning on. I hope I haven't bored you too senseless, and we really look forward to hearing your exciting ideas over the coming months. So I will just close us out with a Karakia. Ono atura te putaki o na korero, ki o atia te hinanaro, ki nākau te kaha tonu, ki a mau tonu ki te honanga tangata, whakairea e rongo, ki paiatara e whare, ka whakamaua ki a tīna, hui e tā ki e. Kia ora. Thank you, team.